What's up, guys? Welcome to another Voice of JST, and this time the topic is on the recent interesting news regarding Dead or Alive 5 last round tournaments. This news came about a few days ago regarding the DOA5 costumes being soft banned by the community. To make a long story short, you can check the link in the description to find the full story, but to make a long story short, the DOA5 the DOA5 community has suggested a soft ban on several overly sexualized costumes to improve the public image of the game at tournaments. Now, in the first place, this is understandable. Okay, look, the thing is, at the end of the day, we can argue about sexualization till we're blue in the face, and we can argue about how stupid this decision is, and I'm actually going to talk about this afterwards. But yes, I can understand where this has come from. This hasn't come from a place of malice. This hasn't come from a place of trying to ruin what makes the game, unique. It's just trying to basically make the public image and public opinion of DOA something other than that booby game or the bikini game. In fact, most people still think the DOA isn't actually a fighting game series. They just think of the volleyball games, and fairly so. I don't blame them for thinking that. And you don't want that situation where people are watching a stream, DOA5 comes on, and people are like, "Oh, this is just that bikini game," or "This is just that booby game," and they just click away. So fair enough. They want it to be that when people are playing at tournaments and they see the matches, they see some costumes. Maybe some of them are kind of, sexy or revealing, but the point is they're not like bikinis or G-strings, and people actually get to see the gameplay for what it is, because unfortunately people are superficial when that's the first thing they're going to see, and that's the first thing they're going to judge. So instead of just turning people away instantly by doing that, they just want to promote the gameplay. That's all they're trying to do. That said, this is where my very long criticism comes into it. So fair enough, they're trying to improve the public image of DOA at fighting game tournaments. That's fine. But in the first place, this is kind of a harsh decision. They're forcing people to do it just because of criticism that the game tends to get from other people. And I think that's censoring to an extent. I mean, I know it's just a soft ban. They're just suggesting that players do it, like strongly suggesting. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're forcing players not to do it. But at the same time, I think that by forcing people to not use costumes that are in the game, designed for how the game is, simply because of the criticism that the game gets from people who don't like it, seems kind of like a moot point. Instead of being proud of the game itself, instead of being proud to be a DOA player and being into the game, you're acting ashamed of it, just like the people who criticize it in the first place. You're basically giving them what they want. You're basically making it so that even you feel bad. Granted, I know there's people who play DOA that may not necessarily like the bikini costumes. They might like the game overall. They might like the majority of the costumes, but they just don't, gravitate towards the bikini costumes, which is fine. Because I don't particularly use the bikini costumes myself. I use, the regular costumes that make the character. I mean, this is from my limited time with DOA5 overall, but I use the regular costumes for each of the characters that I play, like the cool ones, some of the ninja ones, obviously some of the sexy ones too, but the bikini ones are they're okay. I wouldn't personally use them in a fight, only because I like to make my costumes look cool. If it's sexy, that's for other purposes. It's not necessarily for, you can do that while playing with friends or whatever. But even then, to even say something like tastefully sexy, that's imposing a subjective standard. Because at this point, what might be tastefully sexy to me might be too revealing to someone else. What might be too revealing to someone else might actually be tastefully sexy. That's the point. So I feel like, really, we're arguing semantics at this point. We're not actually talking about anything important. When, really, if we're trying to focus on the gameplay, isn't that what's not being focused on? Now we're making this whole controversy about the costumes and drawing attention to something that otherwise shouldn't be talked about in the first place. And mind you, if we're going to ban costumes, shouldn't we ban characters? Because there's some characters in DOA that show way too much skin regardless of what costume they're wearing. Perfect example. Tina. Tina's default costumes are just as revealing as any of the bikini ones. Every single one of her costumes, her boobs are hanging out. Like, that's her default costumes. Are we going to ban Tina because, she's too revealing for streams? I can't think of too many other characters, but the point is that there are characters who are skimpy regardless of what they're wearing. In fact, I'm going to read a quote here from one of the Event Hub's comments, because there's some pretty good comments on that thread, which is surprising. I usually think the Event Hub's usually craps all over the DOA games, but this time, here's one of the comments. The comment said, "The people who don't like DOA sexualization won't change their opinion because Kasumi is wearing her revealing standard ninja suit instead of a swimsuit." And he's right. And this brings me probably to a really big point, and I'll come to that later on. Because in the first place, you know, why are we trying to make Dead or Alive focus on just pure gameplay, which is great, when the game overall is that's what it is, right? And as I said, I'll get to that in a second. I want to get through a few more points at first. You know, so I feel like, one, we're banning costumes, soft banning, which I think is silly in the first place. Then we could probably ban entire characters, which is dumb, and it's going to restrict the competitive gameplay. But obviously, if we're talking about making the game look less skimpy, then might as well ban Tina, because that's her entire character. And also, I mean, just want a quick side point. I'm not going to get into it. You're free to think what you want about this point, because I know you will. There's, you know, notice how in this particular thing, we're going to ban the costumes of the female characters, not the male ones. You know, not the male characters with their Speedos and their MMA gear and, you know, characters like Janley who are shirtless by default. No, that's fine. Think of that what you will, okay? Think about that. We're banning the female character costumes, not the male ones. I'm going to touch that one. I know what my opinion is. You can have yours. That's fine. But I'm going to move on. Now, see, I think, and I think a lot of people think as well, DOA should focus on attracting fans of the game overall. Why are the community spending so much time trying to improve the quote-unquote public image of a game that, even through its marketing prestige alone, people know what it's all about? If you're going to increase the popularity of DOA, do it for the game overall. Promote the game as, say, basically like this. Say to people, do you like 3D fighters? Do you like excellent visuals? Do you like, you know, some explosive gameplay like you're playing a Michael Bay movie? Do you like a triangle system of mechanics where everything counters something and there's no, you know, mechanic that can't be stopped? You know, do you like mind games? Do you like, you know, free flow combat within a 3D space? Something similar to Tekken. You know, that's how you promote the game. That's what you need to do. You need to show people the game and basically explain it and, you know, let them decide. That's the basic point. That's what DOA should be focusing on, not trying to remove costumes to get people into the game who probably wouldn't like it. I mean, it's like removing fan service from High School of the Dead, just so we can increase the popularity of it. To what end? The fan service is a part of the game, the anime, sorry. You may not like that. You may not be happy with it. You might feel, and a lot of people feel, High School of the Dead could have been bigger and better without the fan service. Maybe. But at the same time, High School of the Dead would have not been what it was. It wouldn't have been what Shoji Sato, the artist of High School of the Dead, would have intended. And also, it would have been from going from this kind of awesome, cool, sexy zombie, you know, action flick to just zombie action flick. And that's it. And hey, maybe that would have gotten more fans, but I feel like that ruins what made High School of the Dead unique. And you might say, oh, but that's stupid. That's a disgusting feature. Why does it need it? Keep your standards to yourself, homie. Like, I appreciate you feel that way, but that's how it was. And that's how DOA is. And I feel like we need to accept that instead of trying to force this image that the game isn't in order to attract people who, quite frankly, probably wouldn't like it anyway. Mind you, it's not like DOA is the only fighting game that is, you know, guilty of being kind of divisive. Other fighting game series are just as divisive when you get into the nitty-gritty of it. BlazBlue may be a cool anime game on the surface, but it has some really perverted and weird anime cliches and really some really stupid pop culture jokes that most people would just cringe at. Tekken, for its mass appeal, has a really oddball sense of humor and has some borderline creepy jokes and really ridiculous, kind of risque, you know, endings for some of the characters. And Mortal Kombat, obviously Mortal Kombat, once again, really big, but its trivialization of violence, and even the excessive violence in itself, especially upcoming in Mortal Kombat X, puts a lot of people off in the first place. So even if these fighting games may appeal to a lot of people, it may have broad appeal on the surface, when you buy the game, what you're going to be getting? You're going to be getting this game that has all these nuances that you're probably not going to enjoy in the first place. That's the borderline point. Let's just say this. Let's say we soft ban these costumes at Dead or Alive tournaments. People see the fighting and they enjoy it and they think, oh, this is a cool game, right? They go to the store, they buy the game, they put it in their console. Oh, look, bikini costumes. Oh, look, people are playing with all this stuff. Oh, look, there's bouncy boobs everywhere. They're going to be put off by that and they won't play. Point is, if you're the kind of prudish person who wouldn't enjoy that kind of thing in a game, being not shown it and getting the game won't change your opinion of, you know, the sexualization of the game. It is what it is. I don't feel like these are the sort of people we should be attracting. You can increase the public image temporarily, or on streams and stuff like that. But that's streams. That's stream monsters. Stream monsters are the same ones who, say, when's Marvel, and think everything other than Street Fighter is bad. In fact, that's the point I'm going to make. If you want a game that has no niche qualities, no real ridiculous nuance that might be exclusive, nothing that you feel like you have to defend yourself or explain to people about, then guess what? Stop playing DOA, stop playing BlazBlue, stop playing Mortal Kombat, stop playing all of those, go play Street Fighter, go play Marvel, go play something you don't have to defend yourself against from people. That's the bottom line. But Dead or Alive is the sort of game that, unfortunately, even if you soft ban a bunch of costumes, you're not going to increase the overall image of the game, of the series. This is Dead or Alive 5 in a long line of games. And this is Dead or Alive 5 Last Round, the third version of Dead or Alive 5. You honestly think that changing a few costumes is going to change the overall image of a game that's been marketed a certain way for years? I don't really think so. Okay, I can appreciate the effort. In the first place, does DOA even need a wide audience? Does it? Listen, niche audiences thrive. I mean, forgetting the whole sexy content of DOA in particular, but that's its niche. Obviously, most fighting games have fan service costumes. Even Street Fighter does, Marvel does. But DOA pushes it to the extreme, like, cranks it all the way to 10 out of 10, basically. But that's its niche. BlazBlue has the stupid anime tropes. Tekken has these weird Japanesey sense of humor. I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean that in a good way. MK has trivialization of violence, and so on. I mean, to give a slightly different example, I love Street Fighter Cross Tekken. Everybody knows that. Could Street Fighter Cross Tekken be a bigger fighting game? Of course it could. Could it have more fans? Of course it could. Could it appeal to a bigger audience, be as big as the big two? Street Fighter, Marvel. Could it be as big as? Of course it could. But it'd have to stop being Street Fighter Cross Tekken. It would have to remove Pandora, or basically make it a full-blown X Factor clone. It would have to remove probably boost chains and make them, or perhaps make them simpler in a dumber way. It would have to skew the balancing even more to make it so that matchups matter more than actual just playing the game. It would have to create a dumb way for basically anyone to win, anyone to come back, maybe an ultra, system on top of the frickin' Pandora. It would have to go through all these steps to take the game that it is now, which is an honest game, and basically just make it into this popcorn, everybody can win free-for-all that basically frustrates people, just like Street Fighter 4. To make something have mass appeal, you're going to have to make it stop being what it is and make it into something that can't offend even the most easily offended person. And unfortunately, that's how creativity dies. So you may have your qualms about sexy, you may have your problems with the sexualization of female characters in the game, and you may ignore the sexualization of male characters, but you know what, I don't want to get into arguing with people since everybody seems to think it doesn't exist, or whatever. Point is, that's how Dead or Alive is. And if people can't appreciate that, forcing people to try and appreciate this static image we're creating of it at tournaments isn't going to get more people into the game overall. You might get the occasional person who might sit in the middle, like they like the fighting aspect, they might not necessarily like the costume, but they don't play it. But that's the very small minority. That's the common sense people who would likely like the game anyway. I feel like we're not focusing on the right thing. Now, to conclude, does this hurt in the grand scheme of things? Not really. This is a tournament thing, it's not like they're going to Team Ninja Tecmo or saying, take down these dirty costumes, change the image of DOA and make it a wholesome fighting. They're not doing that. They're not trying to turn Dead or Alive inside out and make it something it's not, because that's a whole other can of worms, really. They're trying to make the gameplay the focus at tournaments. Obviously, people love to see costumes in tournaments, and we tend to see that anyway, but obviously, if you're watching a tournament stream, you're there for the tournament. And they want to try and force people to focus on the gameplay, which the method they're doing it misguided, perhaps with the right intentions, but very misguided, and I feel like we're missing the point. But at the end of the day, this wasn't out of malice, this wasn't out of hatred for the game. This is them just trying to say that, the costumes, we feel like they're a bit too revealing for streams, and even though it's an M-rated game, and streams usually are probably supposed to be 13 plus anyway, we just want to make it so that at tournaments, people don't get, not necessarily the wrong idea about Dead or Alive, but they try to focus on the gameplay instead of seeing a bunch of bikini costumes and thinking, oh, this game isn't a serious game. Because As I said at the beginning of this, we can argue about sexualization till we're blue in the face, but unfortunately people judge on first appearances. If they see a bunch of bikini costumes, they'll think that's what the game is. So that's what they're trying to change. That said, and this is my final point, DOA is DOA. Dead or Alive is Dead or Alive. If you want to get people into Dead or Alive as a whole, just show them the gameplay. Don't get this, your panties in the twist, quote unquote, about costumes or bouncy boobs or whatever. That's how the game is. Show people gameplay and let them decide if they're going to enjoy the overall thing. Don't try and force a static image of the game that doesn't represent the full thing to people, to attract the people who wouldn't like it anyway. If you're going to get into Skullgirls, you're going to have to accept that some of the art is kind of lewd. If you're going to get into BlazBlue, you're going to have to accept that some of the female characters, and I guess male characters, are half naked. If you're going to get into Tekken, you're going to have to accept its oddball sense of humor. If you're going to get into Mortal Kombat, you're going to have to accept that, violence is both excessive and trivial. That's how niches work. And in these days where we're trying our hardest not to offend everyone, we're missing the point that what we should be attracting is fans, getting people interested in things because they want to play them, not forcing an idea that it's something it's not. It doesn't affect everyone in the long run, and at the end of the day, this is just at tournaments. They're not trying to say people shouldn't use the costumes, they shouldn't enjoy the game. And then also, I'm just going to say this to you, if you're a DOA fan and you're opposed to this like myself, don't freak out too much. This game has been demonized ever since the beginning. That's not going to stop anytime soon. And it hurts to hear even the community be ashamed of the costumes. But you know what? Don't let that make you ashamed of the costumes. If you want to play with whatever costumes while you're playing at home, or you're playing with your friends, who cares? And if they don't like it, that's their business. You bought the game, that's your game. But that's the bottom line for me. DOA is DOA. This soft man might be for the right idea, although through misguided intentions. But hey, if it works for them, good for them. So that's all I wanted to say. Let me know what you think of the soft ban of the costumes in DOA. Once again, link in the description if you want to check out the full news story. So that's about it. I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for listening, guys. Talk to you later.